Hello, this is Lady Boulay, and welcome back to Black American Lineage. Thank you for your support. Thank you for coming back, for listening to the videos, for responding to the videos. I do enjoy the comments. And today, I'm going to give you another shocker. And I'm going to talk about the only majority black elected state legislature in America. Yes, there has been a majority black state legislature. And let's talk about South Carolina, the great state of South Carolina. 156 years ago in Charleston, South Carolina, on March 17th, 1868, delegates who had been elected to write a new constitution for their state after the Civil War finished their work. What they had accomplished over the previous 2 months was extraordinary. In a state whose pre-war leaders had prided themselves on confining government to rich and powerful men, the delegates to the South Carolina Constitutional Convention of 1868 had created a blueprint for a new government of the people, by the people, and for the people. The road to this revolutionary document was not smooth. In the summer of 1865, President Andrew Johnson, who had taken office after Abraham Lincoln's murder in April, had set out to restore South Carolina to the Union with a government that looked much like the one that had ruled the state before the war. He had pardoned all but a few leading Confederates and then told state officials to write a new constitution that abolished slavery, declared secession illegal, and invalidated South Carolina's war debt. Having accomplished this repudiation of the Confederacy, he promised the state could rejoin the Union. The South Carolina Convention, organized under Johnson's orders, did as he asked, more or less, but its leaders were quite clear that they were not going to change the nature of their government. They considered democracy dangerous. Everybody dreads popular elections, one observer of the Constitutional Convention wrote. Dozens of delegates have said to me that it isn't well to allow the people to elect their own rulers. Now, that's what they were saying in 1868, and that's what they're saying now. Remember, at that time, South Carolina was majority black. So it's understandable that a white politician would say it's not good to let these people elect their own rulers. That attitude carried into the state government that convened under the new Constitution that fall. Its members wrote laws together dubbed the Black Code that forbade black people from owning guns, kept them from working as artisans, mechanics, or shopkeepers without an expensive license that had to be renewed every year, prohibited them from selling anything without written permission from their employers, and contained a raft of similar regulations. Black people, the code said, are not entitled to social or political equality with white persons. So this is where this stuff continues. This is 1868. The 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments have been passed to the Constitution of the United States, granting black people full citizenship and due process under the law. So President Andrew Johnson, who came to office after Lincoln, suggested that South Carolina state legislature pass these black codes. But the Republicans in Congress had no intention of resurrecting a new version of the Old South under the same leaders who had led the secession movement in 1860. They rejected Johnson's new governments across the South and insisted that Southerners instead ratify the 14th Amendment, making former slaves citizens and giving them the same legal protections as white men as a precondition for rejoining the Union. White Southerners in every state except Tennessee refused. They had no intention of accepting black equality, and we're still living with that today. So on March 2nd, 1867, Congress passed an act to provide for the more efficient government of the rebel states. This law became popularly known as the Military Reconstruction Act because it divided the 10 remaining Confederate states into 5 military districts. But it did something much more important than that. It provided for new constitutional conventions in southern states, and delegates to those conventions were to be elected by men of whatever race, color, or previous condition of servitude. In other words, for the first time in American history, African American men could vote for the men who would construct their government. As a leading Republican politician later explained, the recalcitrance of Southern white leaders had led Republicans to pass a law that was of transcendent importance and unprecedented character. It was the most vigorous and determined action ever taken by Congress in time of peace. The effect produced by the measure was far-reaching and radical. It changed the political history of the United States, and that is exactly what we wanted. Over the course of the summer of 1867, U.S. troops registered voters in South Carolina. Since many Southern Democrats boycotted the process, the voters were heavily Republican. In elections held in late November, they chose 124 men to write their new Constitution, reflecting the fact that far more African Americans than white Americans lived in South Carolina. 76 of them, a majority, were African Americans ready to work together with their 48 white colleagues to rebuild a new South Carolina. Now don't miss this. The federal government had to send troops into South Carolina in order for those black men, because it was men, women couldn't vote, for those black men to be able to vote. But when they voted, because black people were the majority in South Carolina, the black men won 76-48. So that is how South Carolina became the only majority black elected state legislature in America. But don't miss this. They had to send the army in there to make sure those people could vote. Just like federal marshals had to escort little Ruby Bridges to an integrated school in New Orleans, Louisiana. And she was only in kindergarten or the first grade. So that's how deeply rooted this is. So ladies and gentlemen, this is why America fights us so hard. Number one, we're being undercounted. There are more of us than they say. And the number that we have is effective. But if they would count us correctly and stop taking away rights from black Americans, our reach and our strength would be even more effective. Those black men had come out of slavery. They knew right from wrong. And when they had an opportunity, they tried to correct the wrongs of the state of South Carolina. So I'm going to do a follow-up video on this because I don't want to make this one too long, but it is important for us to know how effective this legislature was and the lengths that they went through. And I'm talking about the white supremacists to get rid of this majority black legislature. Also, this was during the period of Reconstruction, and black people were doing it big. They hit the ground running, and they were doing it big. And this was a threat to the white supremacists because black people were building businesses, churches, colleges. They were just building communities. Black people in the South were more successful during Reconstruction than white people were. And that's why they were so threatened. So I don't want to make this video too long, so I'm going to end it here. But thank you for listening. And this is historical fact. This is not something that's made up. This is real, but it's hidden. So we have to go digging. We have to go digging to get the facts. But anyway, thank you for listening and have a wonderful day.